Hi everyone. So since my last post was about interviewing, I wanted to talk about some common interviewing questions and how they could be a little tricky and what things you can say, if you find yourself being asked this and you're kind of stuck. Because if you've been on multiple interviews, you begin to notice a trend. A lot of the questions are recycled. A lot of them occur practically every interview that you will ever have. So it's always good to be prepared. I mean, especially since you don't know all the questions that they're going to ask you. It's nice to be prepared for, the handful that are constant, are always there. So the first one that I have been asked time and time again, not just at interviews, but icebreakers, whenever you meet new people at parties or, any kind of get together, you will get this question. Tell me about yourself. I've heard this so many times, and at first I answered it, like anyone else would answer it. So I'm from Las Vegas. I moved here for school. I had this in my undergrad. I did this with my MBA. I gave a very generic answer, very broad, and I told my employers or people who were interviewing me things that really held zero pertinence to the job that I was interviewing for. I gave them a description of myself, which, to be honest with you, I know they didn't care about. Why did I tell them that stuff? Because truth of the matter is, it's great if you have two kids, or that you've been married for 30 years, or that you like to read and go running with your dog. But they don't care. That's not why they're asking. They're not really asking to get to know you better. They're asking to assess how well you fit with this job description. So when they tell you to tell them something about yourself, pick things out that apply to the job, things that relate, things that show them that you are the best fit for this job. Qualities, traits. If you have a hobby that pertains to the job, then by all means say it. But I mean, if you are applying for an editing job, don't bring up the fact that you like to go snowboarding unless it's for a snowboarding company or for a snowboarding magazine. So, I mean, you want to be careful of how you answer this tell me about yourself question, because it's a great question to set yourself apart and to highlight the skills that you have, but it's also awful if you don't answer it correctly. Another question that is very common is, what's one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses, or give me some strengths and weaknesses that you have. I mean, strengths, come on, that's a good question. We all know our strengths, but people, they answer it too modestly. They are afraid of seeming arrogant, and they're afraid of seeming pompous, so they would rather be modest and underplay what they're really capable of. But you know what? They're asking you for your strengths for a reason. They want to know, what are you good at? Why should they hire you? What can you bring to the table? So when you answer this question, one way to not seem arrogant, or if you're afraid of coming off as uh, like in a kind of conceited, one way to avoid this is to say, okay, well, I am incredibly hardworking. For the last 3 years, I've only missed one day of work. And especially when you use the phrase hardworking, it's been used so many times, over times and time again. So it's not going to surprise them. It's not going to shock them, or it's not even going to impress them. It's barely. It might do the exact opposite. It makes you come off as unoriginal. Um, you just come up with this random answer that everyone says. So, especially when you say something, I'm hardworking, or I am dedicated, you really need to back it up. You really need to come up with examples of how are you hardworking, how are you dedicated, how are you loyal to companies. So, if you want to come off as, not too modest, but not like a pompous jerk, say good things about yourself, but then prove it. With your weaknesses, this usually gets a lot of people. They usually say, I don't have any weaknesses. That's an awful answer. Everybody has weaknesses. No one's perfect. Find something that you're not good at. But instead of fixating on that or taking too much time explaining it, turn your negative to a positive. If you're not good at public speaking, tell them how you're working on it. If computer skills aren't your best asset, then take some classes so that you can explain that. Let's say somebody says, "What's your biggest weakness?" And your answer is public speaking. Well, I'm not very good at public speaking, but through the course of the last year, I've really taken an active effort in building up my skills. I've enrolled in some classes, some communication classes at the local community college. I've also been taking the time to read some communication books that have really helped me out. And I volunteer to speak at the Boys and Girls Club every week. And I also have found that through my experiences, practice makes pretty close to perfect, and I feel like I'm achieving this thus far. I mean, you mentioned that you're not good at public speaking, but you also mentioned that you're working on it. You're turning it into a positive, and that's something that is impressive. They also come across behavioral questions that they're going to want to ask you. How have you reacted in this scenario in the past? So if you're applying for a customer service job where you have to deal with customers all day, they might say, give us an example of a time where you had to satisfy an irate customer or something like that. These are nerve-wracking questions because this is when they're specifically asking for an example. They're not just saying, can you deal with an irate customer, or what skills do you have to deal with an irate customer? They want to know an example of a specific instance. So in this case, an easy way to think about it is you think about a previous situation in which you've had this occur, think about what you did, and then think about what the outcome was. I mean, and if you break it down into steps, becomes a lot easier to handle. Just break it down into steps. Think about a previous experience, think about what you did, and think about the result. But these type of questions can really set you apart. They can really help you stand out amongst the other 20,000 applicants because your experiences are your own. No one goes through the same day that you go through. Nobody encounters the same people you encounter. So you really want to hone in on that and pull personal experiences because they're personal. They will set you apart if you have a good one. And then lastly, a final question that I've had come up 100% of the time. Do you have any questions for us? Is there anything that we didn't touch on? The answer is always yes. Yes, there is questions, or there are questions. Even if there aren't, you have to find something to ask about. It can be anything. It can be questions about a company's history. It could be questions about their mission statement. Their mission statement is a great thing to ask. You can say, oh, so I read on your website that within your mission statement, you state this, this, and this. Well, my values and what I'm used to in an environment that I'm used to working in also aligns with your mission statement. Can you please go into more detail about it? Anything. Make a list prior to going in. And so if they answer any questions that are on your list, you can just check them off, but you'll always have backup questions. So I would definitely make sure to prepare a solid list before going to my interview to ask them because this shows that you're showing initiative, that you really want the job, and that you're interested in the company itself. And I mean that a lot of times people don't have questions or they'll say, no, you've answered all of them. There's always going to be questions. And if there aren't, you make it up. So those are just 4 common questions. I mean, there's going to be a variety of them that come up. They can ask you just about anything. There are certain questions that they're not allowed to ask you about, but that's a whole different topic. I really hope this was helpful, and I know that practice really does make close to perfect as possible. So I do encourage you guys to practice your interviewing skills. Practice, practice, practice in front of a mirror with your friends. Yeah, that'll definitely improve your communication skills. It'll definitely make you less nervous and better prepared. Thanks for watching.